You, of course, voted against the Prime Minister's deal. You've been very vocal in the reasons that you don't think it's a good idea. What would she have to do to win your support?
First of all, the Prime Minister needs to hold her nerve. I think we've seen a lot of movement over the last week coming from the EU. You know, we've heard them say, we've heard talk about, rather than having a backstop and a border between Britain and Northern Ireland, we're hearing talk now possibly between the EU and Ireland. So we're hearing stuff like this. We've also heard this week about the French farmers fearing us leaving on a no deal, and also the fishermen. You know, we're hearing ministers in France saying that the fishing industry could be destroyed, be catastrophic for them. So they are starting to get a reality check now, the EU. They've been doing all this brinkmanship. So I think, first of all, the Prime Minister needs to hold her nerve. Secondly, I'd like to see her bin the backstop.
But completely?
Completely, yes.
Would a time limit be enough to win you over?
I think they need to bin it completely. I mean, we've seen the report that Steve Baker and has released this week, along with Peter Lilly, showing an alternative. And let's not forget the ERG came up with, a policy in which we can use existing technology. We've had Owen Paterson out at the borders.
At the same time, though, we spoke to Ireland's Europe Minister on the show, Helen McEntee. Yes. She said that there's no compromise on the backstop. Well, so someone can't both be right.
No, but with respect, you know, they get so much subsidies, Islanders, from the EU. They would say that. They would be, you know, retorting exactly what the EU
But it's also because they're worried
say.
about the border. They're worried about peace.
But let's not forget as well, with the ERG papers that we've had over the last few months, Lord Trimble, who was involved in the peace process, has been involved with these and has recommended these alternative solutions. Now, and also, if we look at the EU, they gave, they suggested back in March last year about the Canada Plus. I mean, if we can extend that for Northern Ireland, then that's fantastic. Then we are delivering on our manifesto commitments.
You see, I can't help but thinking that, you know, the EU and Ireland have been so steadfast in saying that the backstop cannot be negotiated. And if you're not willing to accept it, then it presumably means that you'd be happy to go to WTO, you'd be happy to go to no deal. So just say that.
Oh, well, I'm not afraid to say that. You'll see on Twitter, etc. I'm not afraid to say that, Sophie.
So it's not really about negotiating the deal, is it?
No, it is, because, I mean, ultimately, I want to see a deal, but not a deal that the EU's wrote. It's got to be a deal on our terms. I mean, let's not forget that when we leave the EU, we'll be their largest trading partner, you know, bigger than the US, bigger than China. You know, we hold that £39 billion. That works out over £60 million per constituency. That could be spent here in Britain. And we've got a trade deficit on goods with the EU. They sell far more to us than we do to them. You know, they want a deal just as much as we do. However, it's got to be mutually beneficial. We don't want the EU writing it. And
the EU would say that they have compromised as well.
Oh yes, but let's not forget, back in 2016, Barnier said, I think it was in Le Point newspaper, that his job is to give such a bad deal to the UK post-Brexit that they would want to remain. Well, I think the Prime Minister and our chief negotiators need to stand up and not take that. We need to put our country first. And they want a deal. If we leave on WTO and have that competitive advantage, they will not like that.
OK. Now, it's no secret, of course, that the Conservative Party is pretty split over Brexit right now. And I just want to have a look.
I think both parties are.
No, I think that's right, politicians and the country, perhaps. But I just want to have a look at something that you said 4 months before the referendum in 2016. You were asked about how the party would come together afterwards, and you said it took 18 years for the Conservatives to have a majority government. Yeah. We're not going to mess it up. Are you messing it up now? Because sometimes it can look like that's what's happening.
I think it is a mess, completely. I mean, I've eaten my hat a few times. You know, I said the Prime Minister was on borrowed time, and I've eaten my hat several times, and she's still there, you know. But let's face it, politics is, you know, it's very hard to predict at the moment.
So who's the right leader to guide the Conservative parties out of this mess?
Right, well, I think that I'm a Democrat. This is why I don't want a second referendum. And my colleagues and I, we've had a vote. Yes, I wanted a new leader, but I think it's too late now. We are weeks away, you know, so I respect the decision in our party that they support
in the future days, perhaps?
I think it depends how we end up post-Brexit. It depends. If we're still in a mess, then it should be a Brexiteer. If we're in a good place, which I'd rather hope that is the case, then it could open up to other people, in all honesty. Now, one thing I'd like to say, what I've read in the news today, that maybe we also ought to replace Olly Robbins with Mr May as a chief negotiator, because it seems like he's talking more sense at the moment.
Philip May, there you go. That is an idea. Thank you very much for being on the programme this morning.